All right, here's something to understand about the unlikely rise of Volodymyr Zelensky, the comedian and actor who became Ukraine's president in 2019. Zelensky ran a populist campaign against years and years of political corruption in Ukraine's government. The Ukrainian people had launched two revolutions in the space of a decade, trying to get themselves a leader who would not be corrupt. In 2014, they succeeded in ousting a pro-Russian autocrat after he suddenly abandoned a plan to sign a free trade agreement with the European Union and instead opted for closer ties with Russia. Now, if there's one thing the Ukrainian people had been pretty clear about in recent years is that they wanted greater integration into the West, not with Russia. Ukraine has been trying to get into the European Union and into NATO for years, but has constantly been told they weren't ready. They had to crack down on corruption and strengthen the rule of law and democratic institutions. These were, in fact, all real problems in Ukraine. They were prerequisites for greater formal integration with Western Europe. Essentially, Ukraine had to get its act together. Only then could they join their neighbors like Poland and the Baltic states in orienting themselves westward and away from Russia. Now, the election of this young, charismatic, populist leader elevated to office on the promise of, well, finally getting Ukraine's act together felt like a real opportunity. Now, of course, Vladimir Putin didn't much like this idea. He didn't want to see Ukraine get its act together. Putin preferred that Ukrainians' experience with democracy had been riddled with corruption and disappointment. Plus, he saw this new Ukrainian leader as inexperienced, in way over his head. The guy used to be a comedian, for God's sake. A perfect opportunity to squeeze Ukraine for new concessions like ceding Crimea and eastern territories to Russia and swearing off alliances with the West. This was a moment when what Ukraine really needed was its biggest, strongest partner, the United States, to step up and say that Ukraine and its new president had the full backing and respect and support of the United States, that the U.S. stood with Ukraine and with Zelensky against any Russian aggression. But that's not what Ukraine's new president got. Ukraine's new president, Volodymyr Zelensky, got Donald Trump. Trump refused to invite Zelensky to the White House for a show of solidarity that the new Ukrainian leader so desperately wanted. Trump and his allies instead pushed a conspiracy theory, actually a bit of Russian disinformation, that Ukraine had interfered in the 2016 U.S. election, not Russia. Remember that? Rudy Giuliani led an effort to manufacture dirt in Ukraine on Trump's political opponents. When the American ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, was perceived as a roadblock to that project precisely because she was such a staunch opponent of the corrupt figures in Ukraine who were helping Giuliani spin up this dirt, they trashed Yovanovitch's reputation. Donald Trump ultimately removed her. And, of course, there was the infamous phone call in which that Trump made military aid to Ukraine contingent upon Zelensky doing Trump a favor, announcing investigations into Joe Biden and his son. Trump froze congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine to pressure him. All of this, of course, resulted in Donald Trump's first impeachment, but we tend to see Trump's Ukraine debacle in terms of its domestic political consequences in America. The consequences for Ukraine were far more serious. What Ukraine needed was for Trump to support its new untested, uncorrupt president on the world stage, so he was taken seriously by his neighbors, including Russia, and by his fellow citizens, so that he could be the real leader he needed to be in fending off Vladimir Putin. Instead, Donald Trump chose to try to leverage the situation for his own political gain. And for President Zelensky, having that military aid frozen, having the president of the United States try to shake him down, well, that cost Zelensky in terms of power. It cost him in terms of respect. It cost him in terms of his authority against Vladimir Putin. And who can say what it might end up costing him now that he is in a war that may come down to a matter of small degrees here and there? Back then, in 2019, when Zelensky called Trump, there was an opportunity for the American president to stand behind Ukraine, an opportunity to do better. Donald Trump didn't take it. Of course, one of the reasons we even know about that phone call is because a national security official named Alexander Vindman heard that call. He was listening into it live. He knew it was wrong. He reported it up his chain of command. And then he testified to the United States Congress about it in the impeachment hearing of Donald Trump. Joining us now is the retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He was a Ukraine expert on the National Security Council and a witness in President Trump's first impeachment hearings. Colonel Vindman, it is an honor to have you back with us. Thank you for being here. In your book titled Here Right Matters, you detail this specific matter, the fact that you had provided, you and your cohorts in the White House and the National Security Council had provided guidance and advice that President Trump was supposed to have read and taken to say, you need do very little for Ukraine right now. The congressional aid had already been approved and was on its way to Ukraine. All you need to do is show this man support so that he can stand up against Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump didn't do that.
That's right. He attempted to extort a investigation into his chief rival going into the 2020 election and really undo our own electoral system and our democracy. So he's looking to harm us on that note, while at the same time undermining this brand new leader, untested leader that was facing down a war with Russia, an ongoing war at that point, ongoing for 5 years, and attempting to avert what we see unfolding today. So that kind of support that he needed with regards to arms, with regards to U.S. support, he didn't get it. As a matter of fact, the Trump-Ukraine scandal made Ukraine radioactive for the remainder of the Trump administration, and it actually had a chilling effect on the Biden administration because there was the baggage of all these false accusations against Joe Biden. So the bottom line is that it was really harmful all the way through. There's a direct red line from that episode to really, frankly, where we are today, because Vladimir Putin saw a lot of opportunity in the lack of support to Ukraine. He saw a lot of opportunity in the fact that Ukraine was radioactive and that half of our political elites, the Republican Party, was bandwagoning, cheerleading for Donald Trump. And for Putin, sorry.
I ask you this not to be. I ask you this not to be political, because as you and I have been talking over the last week, you know that I'm on the border and I'm seeing these Ukrainians come here in the freezing cold, try to find a home, escaping terror. I just don't wish to have a political conversation. But in the end, we are seeing the Ukrainian resistance. We are seeing the efforts that the Ukrainians are going to. Whether this fails or succeeds for Ukrainians will come down to a matter of degrees. And one day we may look back at this and said, had Donald Trump done something different, had America done something different in that moment where you wrote the report, you wrote the brief that said, please just do this, the outcome might be different.
I think that's very true. I think it's clear to me that we were looking to avoid this major confrontation, and Trump pushed us in the other direction. We were always our policy, frankly, for 2 decades was soft on Russia, soft on Russian abuses towards its neighbors, towards the democracies, towards our security. But if we were soft and we were inching in that direction, the Trump administration lurched us in that direction and certainly undermined the security of Ukraine and the United States, because this war is so large, the largest country in the world fighting the largest country in Europe. That's the possibility of that staying limited is extremely low.